Hey there, Steve Rubis with another installment of Capital Markets Investor Relations in 2 minutes or less. This is our second video in our series on investor relations, job searches, and career data. And this video is going to walk through the first quarter of 2025 job search trends that we're seeing based on the stats that we track stemming from our job search of 2023 and 2024. So let's start with the high level. These are the key learnings. If you don't watch the whole video, these are the things you need to take away from the data that we've compiled. And it starts with this idea that there's about a 10% conversion rate of opportunity to conversation at both the global all IR level and number one IR level opportunity market. And what's interesting is this 10% rate is materially less than the 21.4% pandemic peak, and it's running through about 2 to 3 percentage points below our conversion rate for 23 and 24. And so I think this is where IROs are going to really own in on, is understanding, okay, the market is weak. I can relate to this number. Now, what's really interesting is that when you look at the data, it's actually suggesting that there's a robust market or a recovery here in the first quarter. And what's interesting is that in terms of both the all levels of IR and number one IR opportunities, there were 50 of each in the first quarter. And what you had is that the all level was higher in January versus number one, and then that inflected as we worked through March, and ultimately the numbers worked out that it was 50 of each. So when you look, that's what's happened. The IR number one market ramped nicely from January to March, and the global all level was stable. Now, two caveats to think about here are this idea that the majority of opportunities tracked in my data come from LinkedIn and Indeed, not from third-party recruiters or executive recruiters. And even more importantly, the Trump tariffs have not really impacted the job market as of the first quarter. There's no evidence that the Trump tariffs had a negative impact on the job market, which we think is going to be very different when we get to our second quarter data update. So let's get into the opportunities or applications here in the first quarter. And when you look at it, the market is really stabilized. When you look at it, the year over year growth, we're only up about 9%, but on the 2-year compare, we're up about 72%. And that's suggesting that there's been some strength in normalization. And again, you're seeing it in the upper right here, where you can see how the market has normalized around our 17 average opportunities in a month. We've been operating at the mid to high teens since December of 24, and a quarterly look, we're operating well above 45 opportunities, which is really close to that 50 average every quarter. And so what this is suggesting is that there's lots of opportunity, but no one's hiring. IROs are probably thinking, who's getting these jobs despite the market stabilization? So let's look at the number one IR market. And again, this is even stronger story here in the first quarter. You're seeing 127% growth in opportunities year over year. The 2-year compare is up 108%, which is really interesting when you look at it on a year over year basis, because from 23 to 24, the market declined 8%. And then from 24 to 25, we've grown almost 130%, which is showing a very strong recovery in the number one IR market. And you see that in the monthly data, where the market ramped from 12 to 22 between January and March. And again, we're operating well above the 34 applications in a given quarter. We're at 50. This is a peak so far for the 2 years and a quarter of data that we've tracked this, which is suggesting some recovery in the investor relations job market. And again, IROs who are unemployed or even sitting in a seat are probably saying, who are getting these jobs, and is this actually real? So let's get into the conversion data, which is the idea of moving from an application to an actual conversation. So at the global level, you're again seeing some stabilization. I think the key takeaway here is that we're at a higher conversion rate. We're coming off the bottom of the third quarter. It seems that the market has digested the disruption or uncertainty around the presidential election cycle and has really come back in earnest here post-election in the fourth quarter and first quarter of 25. So now let's look at the number one IRO. Very similar conversion rates. Again, the key takeaway is that the number one IR job market seems really strong. And with the strength here in the first quarter, our average number of applications went from 33 to 34. And so I think if you're someone who was looking for a job, first quarter of 25 was a very robust environment. And I think What you're going to see when we do our second quarter, mid-quarter update is a very different story. That here in the second quarter, the Trump tariffs have seemingly had a very significant impact on the job market. And I don't think we're going to get back to this 50 level in the second quarter of 25. So with that, always here for questions, always here to network and talk more about investor relations. Thanks for watching.